Hello. In this presentation, we'll be discussing about the Android Studio Integrated Development Environment, which is a multi-platform development environment for Android operating system. So, what is it? It is the official integrated environment for developing Android applications. It's a good tool because it allows for code editing, debugging, testing, and profiling all together integrated in one solution. And it has a very intelligent code editor supporting advanced code completion, refactoring, and code analysis. And it has also an Android emulator inside for fast prototyping and to test multiple device configuration, because one of the biggest problems we have with Android is that it has to support many different resolutions, many different display sizes, and a lot of different architectures, because there are a full set of different devices that can be used for with the Android operating system. And also, it has an integrated simulation for different devices, different additional features that we have on mobile phones, like GPS location, motion sensors, and so on. And it has the possibility of applying immediate changes and see what are the results on our application instantly. It has a Gradle build based system, which is very, very robust and flexible. And it is a bit difficult to configure everything at the very beginning, but if you leave it in the setup, first setup, it should work without with very, very little trouble. It is also integrated with the version control systems, visual control tools that allow to work in teams, and it includes copy of some project samples and sample code to start with the application development. And moreover, it integrates very extensive testing tools in order to trap UI events that can be recorded to reproduce user interaction. It is available on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and you can download the application from the official website developer.android.com for whatever platform you prefer. Just follow the installation instruction for the specific package and perform an update check to make sure that the latest version is installed. Then you have to install the SDK because sometimes it's not available in the installation package, so it's better to check if it is available. And in case it's not, install it. Then I suggest to create your first test project to verify that everything is okay, that everything is in place, and that you can start working on real application. And here you have the links to check to go to download to follow the instructions for the first project. Then you can build and run the application with the emulator, which also has to be set up. This is the layout of the main user interface, in which you can see we have some many panels. There are menus, there are icons, and here there are I highlighted only the most important features of the user interface. Here you have the directory tree that represents the project structure. Then here you have a list of possible widgets you can use for your layout, and in the middle panel there is the user interface layout for all the activities that you are developing. Here you can see on the right the hierarchy of the user interface with all the widget that have been placed in the hierarchical format, and here the panel, the rightmost panel bottom is it contains the property list and all the properties that can be set and checked for the user interface or for the widget that is active at the moment. There are some additional buttons that you can play with. One is the most important ones are here on the top and are the first that can start the device emulator. But here you can start your application in in debug mode. Here there is a virtual device manager that allows you to configure your virtual emulated device, and the SDK manager that allows to download what are the SDKs that you need for the target platform, the different target platform, because each target platforms need a different SDK. So the Android applications are written in Java, and all the app-code data resources are packaged in APK files for distribution. From the security point, the applications live in their own sandbox, security sandbox, and Android is natively a Linux multi-user operating system, so every application is considered a user, a different user. Each process uses its own virtual machine, and therefore it's isolated from the other apps. An app can also cannot access part of the system for which it is not given permission. The problem with permission is causing a lot of trouble when you are a beginner, because you don't know exactly which grant you need to allow for a certain application, and moreover the documentation is not so clear in many cases. Android starts application when needed and shut down the process without asking if system resources are needed, because resources under the Android operating system are very limited, and so the operating system is free to close whatever application is not used at a certain point in time. This has to be taken into account when designing an application. The application components are the building blocks, the basic building blocks of an Android application, and we have four different components. The activities that are the entry point for interacting with the user. They are the screens of the user interface. We have services that are task that we can run in background for our application. We have content providers that are able to manage a shared set of application data that can be stored in the file system, and the broadcast receiver that are a feature that enables your application to receive messages from this or events from the system, and outside the flow, so it's a kind of triggered events that can wake up your application or certain task of your application. And there are also many design patterns already available for the application structure. Okay, Android application development is not a very easy task. Activities and services sometimes do not behave as expected in traditional programming, and there are rapid changes in the SDK and platform architecture, so it's really hard to keep the pace. huge amount of documents, tutorials, materials that you can read and read for your self-instruction is are available, but it's difficult to keep the pace also with everything, every piece of documentation that you can find around. And moreover, you require a change of perspective from revisional application development because there are some threads that may be blocking the user interface, for instance, or some other features of the operating system that you should take into account when designing the application. Specifically, what I just mentioned before, the fact that the operating system can close down an application without asking anything to the user. The resources they are very limited, or maybe depend on the target platform, but generally we should think about limited resources. And then the state of your application must always be kept stored somewhere in your system because in this way you can always recover the execution. The emulator is awfully slow, but you can set up the system to debug on real devices. This is somehow limiting because if you have a real device, the layout, the user interface, the size of the display, and all those hardware characteristics are fixed and specific for that device, but it's much faster, and for many applications, it's better to use real devices. In order to debug on real devices, you should set up the developer option on the device. So there are USB and other features menus in which you can set up the developer options. And those developer options are generally hidden on newer devices for security reason, of course, but you can enable them by following setting about phone, then tap the build number 7 times, and then you can switch back to the previous screen to see that the developer options are enabled. Moreover, on Windows and Linux, you need to install a specific USB driver in order to connect to the mobile phones for debugging. But this is, again, something which is not so difficult to do. Anyway, you have additional details here in the link reported in the presentation. The official site is reported here. Then there are some other pointers to developer training and other material that is very useful for design very beautiful user interfaces. Moreover, here you can see the pointer to the API guides. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.